Good morning, everyone. It's Gary with Soccer Pro. Today I have Scott Martin with us, and he is the author of Revitalizing Real Madrid. He's also the author of the Soccer Parent Handbook that is about to drop imminently. And in that book, he talks about the game of soccer, the players, and the relationship with their parents. So, welcome, Scott. Please help us out and tell us a little bit more about you. And I can't wait to hear more about this book.
Well, Gary, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. So this book is really a decade in the making. So it was about a decade ago that I started coaching back in California. Started with at the high school level and then made my jump into club soccer. And it's continued through my move to North Carolina, coaching now with Charlotte Soccer Academy. And it was that deep dive into coaching that fueled my love of tactics that led to me joining Total Football Analysis, where I'm now a senior tactical analyst. And from there, it gave me the platform to not only start discussing tactics, which we see with my first book, Revitalizing Real Madrid, but it's now given me the ability to to really combine the platform of tactical analyst with coach. And so that's led to this project, the Soccer Parent Handbook. So within that handbook, it's my chance to connect with Chris Mumford, a professor at UNC, for entrepreneurship and innovation, to address something that's very passionate to us. He is a soccer parent and me as a soccer coach. We want to take a deep dive into what the current culture surrounding soccer parenting looks like. Just some of the troubling trends that we see around the youth game, but then also use that as a positive. So, if this is where we acknowledge we are, how do we get to this next step? So for Chris and I, it's a means of providing some information about the game. Chris himself was a goalkeeper at UNC. His son, Eli, is a very highly rated goalkeeper with D1 options for next year. So we wanted to take a deep dive into what soccer parenting looks like, provide some education, some of the ins and outs of the games, the rules, tactical influencers within the game, and then give a very practical approach to what this looks like step by step. So it's a project that's very dear to us. And like you said, it's dropping at some point this week on Amazon. So we're very excited about that.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, let's take it from the youth standpoint and work our way up. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the problems that you're solving or helping to solve with this book. So most parents are coming into soccer, either they've played themselves or many haven't. And then their first experience is going to be with club soccer or rec soccer programs at maybe 5, 6 years of age. So where do these parents fit in with these 5, 6, 7-year-old aspiring soccer players?
So I love that we're starting here because one of the guys we interviewed for the book is Tom Byer, who's an internationally renowned youth development guru who starts at the entry level. So anywhere from 2 to 6, 7, maybe 8 years old. And Tom is based in Japan, and most of the parents that he's worked with have limited to no experience within the game itself. But what he does, instead of focusing on tactics or any of the concepts we're going to see at the pro level or even at the higher reaches of the youth game, he focuses on what youth development needs to look like in those early stages. How can we be more effective at the entry level? And for parents, it really comes down to just helping your kids enjoy the ball. Letting them have an enjoyment of manipulating the ball, having it at their feet, and mastering their control of it. And for Tom, as he told us in his interview, his focus actually wasn't on the kids. It was actually on the parents. And so, as a parent of a 5-year-old, I can tell you, it speaks to my experience as a parent, where some of the best times I have with my 2 sons is just in going out into the living room or even a hallway. We've played soccer there just so I can keep the space narrow. So they have to use a little bit of deception to take me one way and then go the other. But it's in developing an ability to master a project, and then also understanding that focus is a big part of learning. And so if we can show greater focus for longer periods of time as we try to learn these skills, that helps us not only on the soccer field, but that's going to help our kids in the classroom and just develop a passion for learning. And us taking a role in that project, in our kids' passion, that helps improve our bond with them. I mean, you don't have to coach the kids at that point. Maybe you show them how to do the pullback V and, show them what that chop forward looks like. But for the most part, you're just playing. And so you're building a strong foundation just in the way you engage your kid at this young age. And we see that pays dividends later on.
Now, you mentioned 2-year-old up to 6. This is a question that comes up from parents a lot when they call me at Soccer Labs and they say, well, my son is this age or my daughter is this age. Is that too early? And I always take the opinion of, well, are they kicking the ball? Do they have basic mechanical skills? How early is too early in your opinion? Well, for mine, we have to make them fit into our class, right? So we can't go too young. But when you're talking about 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, what is the right time to start?
So I'll say my oldest son, or the older of my 2 boys, Sammy, he has not yet played in a competitive environment. So, and this is at 5 years old. We've just signed him up for his first soccer camp this summer. So he's very excited about that. But I think you can do so much good at home that you really don't have to look into a more competitive environment until a little bit later. And for me personally, I've actually seen, the 4v4 games at the U6 level. And I just ask myself, why? Why do we have 8 little kids on the field at the same time with one soccer ball? And we just watch them run around in the hive.
Right.
What benefit is that to them? So, I mean, if there's 1 or 2 good players on the field, they're going to have the ball the entire time.
Yep.
So, I mean, one thing I would love to see from clubs, even rec levels, city leagues, just break that down into a 2v2 game. 1 player on the ball, small goal, maybe one who's a little bit more defensive, one a little more attacking, and then you rotate. And it doesn't even have to be official competition from what I've seen. I would just love to have a league where players show up on a practice or a game day. They're put in a 1v1 or 2v2 situation. And if they're doing too well in that game, they're having way too much success, it's way too easy, you just move them up a field.
Right.
And so by the end, you have players playing at an appropriate level, and you're building confidence for the players who are at the bottom of the spectrum. So I think that's where we really, really miss out on player development. That's where I would take it. I don't think you have to jump in to a competitive environment really early. Anson Dorrance, another contributor for the book, he's said the exact same thing. Just enjoy your time with them.
Keep it fun.
Spend time with them on the ball. Yep. That's all you need.
Keep it fun. Those little, let's call them scrimmages or whatever you want to call them, the 4v4, 3v3s. Like you say, if there's one kid that's too dominant, it's just him running down the field, kicking the ball. There's no goalkeeper and boom, it's done. So I kind of like your idea of shrinking that down to a 1v1 or a 2v2. But okay, so let's move on. Now we're getting these kids into the 7, 8, 9-year-old range. And let's talk about what is appropriate at that age level.
Yeah, so there are a number of options here. If you have the benefit of family or good friends nearby who have kids your age who enjoy the game, this is a great way to work out little pickup games. Or we just had family over for Easter. We got to play, my son and I played 2v2 against his 2 older cousins. So, I think we can still have a very heavy emphasis on just pickup soccer. But the kids have so much fun. There's no coach there to direct them, to tell them what to do every moment. They have the ball at their feet. So they have to figure it out on their own. And there's a huge positive there. While we were playing this Easter, I had one conversation with my son. It's like, so is it a little more difficult to dribble into 2 players or 1? I said 2 players. So would it be easier if when you're with 2, you pass the ball back to me? And then I pull someone over here and then I play back to you so you can dribble against 1. So, yeah, that would be easier. And so, that was the one coaching point I had in, an hour of play. So I think there's still a lot of benefits from pickup that kids will enjoy at 7 and 8. And additionally, this is where you could look to get them into, I think, some rec leagues. If you really want to, you could look at academies for youth clubs. That's an option as well. And then also one thing that we will probably look at for my kids is futsal. I love the tight spaces, the necessity for ball control. The ball's a little bit heavier, so they need to strike it a little bit better to make any kind of progress with the ball.
They can't just...
So even at that next level, there are options that de-emphasize just putting them in the most competitive environment possible and finding something that's enjoyable and building skill at the same time.
Right. And that's really important, is getting the skills built at that level. Too many times you'll see these kids come in at higher age groups, very athletic kids, and in fact, good players because they're very athletic, but they have some, let's call it habits that need to be broken and good habits formed. And too many times you'll see the kids that just never got the help or the assistance to build up a skills level of using their right foot, their left foot, how to dribble properly, how to shoot properly with both feet, how to pass properly with both feet. And those are foundational skills that they need. And when they have them, everything they're doing out on the field just becomes that much better for them, because now they're building up skills on top of a good foundation versus trying to build on something that's a little shaky. And then they start doing weird things on their first touch. They start doing things that are maybe coming around the ball to get it on their right foot instead of just using their left foot and getting the ball off their foot faster. So those foundational skills are really important at that age. They don't have to be competitive, but they can be foundational skill building things that help them. So when they get into the older age and they are getting into the higher, more competitive levels, they are better equipped to get there. So having said that, let's segue into going into those higher age groups. Let's get into the 10, 11, 12-year-old age group and what you think parents need to be looking at that point.
Yeah, so I like that you've touched upon the need for personal development or player development rather than getting into the most competitive environment possible. That's a nice segue into some of the points we made at the start of the book and that were backed up by Gary Butte, who's the CEO of North Carolina FC, which I think right now it's either the first or second largest club in North Carolina and top 10 in the country. So we start the book by saying winning is not everything. So if that pierces your ears, you might need to look elsewhere.
Right.
But the reason we say this is because when you focus on just winning the game at a young age, you tend to get a little sloppy. You tend to just play to the big, fast athlete up top who can run by the defense or take advantage of a mistake and just score an easy goal. And because they have an athletic advantage at that age, it's easier for them to score. The chances, especially if the other team is trying to actually play the game and develop skills, develop some ideas, there's going to be loads of mistakes.
Right.
And that's okay. That's part of the learning process. But the danger, though, is that you simplify what you're trying to do with the 10, 11, and 12-year-olds, have them focus on just a point A to point B philosophy just to win a few games early on. One of the points Gary Butte made is that the players who are often the best at 10, 11, and 12 are very rarely the best by 16, 17, 18.
Yeah.
And to your point, that's because they abandon their technical and tactical development, instead relying on a temporary athletic advantage. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that with my own club. Players who started off on first and second teams at those younger age groups, they plateau right around U14, U15. Mm-hmm. And from there, just because they don't have the strong tactical or technical foundation, or because the tactical ideas really haven't developed, because they really haven't needed them to that point, they become almost holes in the team's tactics. You right. Almost as a coach have to really simplify just to get anything out of them. And so, yep. I mean, if as a parent, if the club does not have a strong developmental philosophy, or even if you're paired with a coach who is just very direct, point A to point B. You play along that line, nothing else. There's not many tactical ideas. That's a situation where you want to run. If you want just the cheap plastic trophies at U11, U12, sure, stick around, you'll win them. If you want something lasting, if your kid has a passion to play collegiately or play in the pros, you're not thinking about it so much at U11, U12. But if you want that to even be an option by the time they reach U16, U17, and they're starting to think about that, you've got to put them in a position where they're learning the very core concepts and core skills of the game at a young age. And as a parent, we have to understand mistakes are going to happen. And we can't make too much of the mistakes at the young age groups. Quite frankly, if they're not making mistakes, they're really not trying. They're not being pushed hard enough. Yeah. So that as a parent, and this is something we're trying to accomplish with this book, is instead of focusing on the easy bit of analysis, did we win the game or did we not? Let's take the conversation elsewhere.
Yeah.
It's nice to win. We want to pick up some wins. It's great for the kids for the positivity of the mind, but we want them to pick up core skills that will have a lasting impact and allow them to stay in the game a little bit longer and to just open more doors for them in the future if that's what they want.
Just for clarity, when people talk about it's okay to lose and you're not going to win them all, that doesn't mean you're not playing to win. You're playing to win all your games. And if you're playing with good development, eventually you will win more than you lose. But what we're talking about is winning at all costs. There's a difference between playing to win and winning at all costs. And that's a very important difference because one is playing to win with good development. The other is just booting the ball and trying to get it in with your top horses up front. So that's an important distinction.
Yeah. 2 of our contributors to the book are U.S. internationals. So from the women's side, we had Sam Mewis, who just won the 2020 U.S. Women's Player of the Year award. Mm-hmm. And on the men's side, we have Heath Pierce, who I think he last played his international matches about 5 or 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. So but with both of these high performance athletes, and as well as the kids we interviewed for the book, they all said that they've never had a need for a parent yelling at them to go win the game or to go score a goal or run faster or show me you want to win. Right. So that's those external influencers never have much of an influence. The kids want that. The kids want that themselves.
Right.
But they're all trying to balance that instinct with the information their teammates are giving them, the sessions that they worked on at practice the past week, the year worth of development. So they are trying to put it all together. It can't just be, I'm going to win. We're not machines like that. Yeah. It's not enough just to say, I want to win. Thinking back to one of my favorite coaching courses back when I was in California, we had Frans Hoek, who was Louis van Gaal's assistant coach at Manchester United, the Dutch national team, Barcelona. He said in the Netherlands, it's not enough to win. You have to win and dominate.
Yeah.
So that's when we're looking at youth development, that's what we're getting at. Mm-hmm. And there has to be the understanding that the desire to win will almost always be there. I mean, it's very few kids who don't care. And they're usually kids who have had very little success or very little development, who've lost a love for the game that don't care about winning. Right. Everyone else wants to win. I mean, that's 98% of the kids.
Yeah. And, and we get kids at Soccer Labs. Again, we're a technical skills development center, so we're not playing any games, right? When we play our competitions, it's side by side. We'll set up parallel courses where they have to go through a skills course and do it faster. It's like obstacle courses, let's just say that. Obstacle courses side by side, and the first one to get through it all and then get their ball in the net, that's usually the culmination because they like to shoot, is the winner. And they get super competitive on those things, even though they're not even coming in contact with each other. And then we will even do things with a fit light system where it's these lights that track everything. And we'll do wind sprints, and these kids will kill each other trying to beat each other just on wind sprints. And if they lose, and it's all on time, right? So if they don't get the best time, you get kids staying after practice going like, let me try that one more time. I just, because they want to win so bad. But again, let's just bounce back to, and I'm a big proponent of winning. I always talk about winning all the time, but it's such an important distinction to talk about win at all cost versus playing to win. And all kids want to play to win, but we shouldn't play to win at all costs. That's just really the dividing line. So now, as we're talking about competing and getting more aggressive with winning and, all those other things, we're into our teenage years. So as the kids get into the teenage years, and now we get that interaction with the parents coming home in the car, maybe they had a good game, maybe a bad game, that sort of thing. Take us through those sorts of scenarios and what you guys are talking about in your book.
Yeah. So one of the things we've done with this book is we've actually provided a checklist for parents just to help us.
That's a great idea.
Track our emotions and our approach as we head to the field and as we leave. So as we get there, make sure you know the arrival time. Make sure your kid has all the equipment, both uniforms. And my club wears blue, so there's always a jersey conflict. So make sure you're prepared to get to the game. When you get there, you want to really measure your interaction with the other parents. What kind of a tone are you setting? Is there a positive tone, a negative tone, or how much are you talking to the players? And if you are talking to the players, is it cheering or directing? That's one of the big things we talk about in the book. If you're cheering, you're complimenting them for something that's already happened. You're not having any influence in the way the play goes, whether it's positive or negative. If you're directing, you're telling a player, do this right now to achieve this result. And that's something we want parents to stay away from, because ultimately the players already have their own thoughts. They're already looking around the field. They're overwhelmed with sensory data as it is. Right. Then they have the thoughts from the practices. They have the communication from teammates. Let them play. Yep. Let them make a decision. So yeah, we talk about conduct with referees.
Well, let's bounce back to that one, just on that topic. I want to just expand on that for a second. One of the things I did as a parent was I was that parent, that was always the one with the club iPod taking the video for the team. And what is interesting is being at the center of the field on the parent side, and then of course picking up all the conversations and my own thoughts as well. So many times in a game, at the live game, I would look at something and my eyes would tell me one thing, my thoughts would tell me one thing, and then I would go back and watch the video. It was completely different. Okay, completely different. So the best thing you can do at a game is just cheer, because the instructions and the complaints you have, especially about the refs, where they're like, oh, that was a horrible call. Well, most times they're not. I mean, there's always exceptions. Okay, there's always exceptions. They're human. But 98% of the time, when all these people are complaining and moaning about the ref, you go back and you watch it on video and you find out, ref was right. Most times. Again, there's always exceptions, but for the most part, you're better off just staying silent.
To that point, when an issue does arise, I had an issue with an official just at a game Sunday. Just a missed offside call. Referee was about to call it, put the flag down, and then a goal was scored against us. I approached the referees. I discussed the issue with them, and to the credit of the parents on my sideline, they let me handle it. So that is my job as a coach. And later on, when one of my players took a studs up challenge to the ankle, I took that upon myself as well. That was my conversation to have. My parents let me have that. Okay. And I think by now, this is my second year with the team, third year with some of these kids. They understand that I've got the kids back, that I'm going to make sure that they're not put in harm's way. So I think for a coach, that's building trust with the parent group is big. But then also as a parent, we want to make sure that we're coming into a game knowing whose responsibility it is to have those difficult conversations. And that's where you do want to lean on the coach and the captains to have those conversations. And the way you have them is very important as well. So the coaches should be a little bit more experienced in handling difficult conversations with a referee and being respectful about it.
You brought up a great point about the parent-coach interaction. This is something that can cause a lot of trouble for your kid on a team if you handle this incorrectly. Could you give the parents one piece of advice that they should follow when they think, okay, I've got to go talk to the coach?
Yeah. So my favorite piece of advice, which we cover in the book, is to follow the 48-hour rule. If you're addressing the coach right after the game, you're obviously a little bit heated. The emotions from the game, they're still pretty strong. So rather than addressing the coach then when you're more naturally inclined to anger or to lashing out, let a couple days pass by, think through the issue, and try to think of if this is something that's really important that really needs addressing. So one of the examples I give in the book is I had, 6 o'clock, North Carolina summer, really hot, probably about 100 degrees with humidity on top of that. And God forbid, I ran my session in the sun instead of in the shade.
Yeah.
Because I knew, yeah, I know. I knew that weekend we would have a game at 2 o'clock in the afternoon with no tree coverage. So I wanted the boys to get a little bit acclimated to the heat in our early season practices. I checked my email before I left the field, and 15 minutes into practice, I had a complaint from a parent that I was practicing in the sun rather than the shade.
Yeah.
So if she had waited 48 hours, she would have thought, is this really important? We're playing in the sun this weekend. Does this email need to be sent? I think a lot of times we'll find issues just don't need to be communicated to coaches. They're so minute that there's really not this big overblown process that needs to be undertaken. Yeah, if it is something bigger, then yeah, definitely follow up and make sure that when you communicate with the coach, you're setting the tone for engagement. Whether you're communicating with the coach or player, your spouse, you want to make sure that when you communicate, the desired outcome is resolution. That has to be the approach right from the beginning. So if you leave 48 hours, you can go in with a better mindset and just ensure that your approach is spot on.
Yeah. So basically you're saying, give it some time and let's look for resolution versus just a complaint session.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So I want to get onto the age because my personal philosophy is trying to stay as out of the relationship between the coach and the player as possible, or, in my case, my daughter, right? So once they got into high school, I pretty much just washed my hands of it. When you start looking at the age of these kids, at what point do you say, hey, you've got to go handle that yourself? Don't talk to me about it. Talk to them about it. Don't even think I'm going to advocate for you.
11 or 12 years old. These are life skills that we need our kids to learn. As a culture, we've moved a little bit more towards helicopter parenting, or, we've got to hover above our kids at all times and make sure we're fixing any little issue that comes their way. I want my players to let me know that they're not going to come to practice. I want my players to let me know why they can't be at a game. I want them to let me know if there's an issue, because eventually they have to have that conversation with a teacher, a college professor, a boss. Why not do it with me? Like, start learning those skills at an early age. Understand that I, as a coach, I'm here not only for them in their soccer development, I'm here for them in their personal development as well. I want them to get the reps in now, have these difficult conversations with me so I can give them a little bit of guidance along the way. Or, I can make sure that they understand that I know that they're a little bit nervous, they are worried, and that's okay.
Yeah.
This is a conversation that they can and should have.
Yep. So we've talked about some of the things that parents shouldn't have, and it's easy to get caught into that mindset of don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Yeah. But what I'd like to do is end the conversation with 2, maybe 3 things that you would recommend that parents should be doing. If you could just say, look, do this and this and this, and your kids will have a much better experience as a soccer player. What do you think those ought to be?
So I think the number one thing, and this is probably mostly at the younger age levels, probably primarily because the parents will have a little more energy and they'll tolerate some of the physical pains a little bit easier. Just play with your kids. Like, you don't need to make the environment competitive. I mean, my son and I will play, to 10 in a 1v1 game. That's the level of competitiveness he needs to enjoy it. But first thing, just play with your kids, have fun, enjoy the game with them. Even if you haven't played soccer, just get some touches on the ball. And that shows them that you're investing in their passion, that you're willing to go outside of your own comfort zone to learn a new skill, to show that you're passionate about something they're passionate. And later on, you'll share that. And as someone who grew up with a dad who coached my teams and was a semi-pro player himself, I look back at the days that we used to play together and watching World Cups together very fondly. I mean, those are memories that'll stick with me forever. Second thing, and this is a little bit more big picture, don't get so sucked in. So, I talk to the players all the time about not having tunnel vision on the ball. For a parent, that looks like not having tunnel vision on the performance or on the game itself or on your player's development. Have a bigger picture. So at the older age groups in particular, one of the really worrying trends that I see and that I hear from my players is that performances and results, even in one game, that can have a very negative influence on the player's relationship with the parent. And once you start that downward spiral, I mean, it's really difficult to stop it. I've had some players who hate getting in the car after a game. Like that's their least favorite part of game day, because they know as soon as they get in the car, they're going to get grilled for everything that went wrong,
right?
Both from a team perspective and an individual. So let the kids play, take a big picture approach, that each game, each practice, it's one small part of this big picture. Not everything has to be right or perfect here. There are going to be mistakes along the way. But as parents, we can help the players learn from those, to take a growth mindset in the way we experience failure. And, that doesn't mean talking about the game in the car. Actually, we recommend not talking about the game in the car. Instead of focusing on, potential negative, this is a chance for us as parents to take a positive route. Whether it's going out to get a post-game ice cream or a post-game meal. For me, when I drove home from games with my dads, if the Oakland A's were on, we listened to the Oakland A's game, and we loved it. Instead of talking about the game, we talked about whether Jason Giambi should be in the 3 spot or the 4. Should we extend Miguel Tejada or Eric Chavez? What are we going to do with the big 3 in our pitching staff? That let me decompress. That let me kind of sift through the emotions that I just experienced in the game, the thoughts that I had experienced at a very low stress level. And I'm very grateful to my dad for allowing me to do that, because he did have a high level of soccer knowledge where he could have just said, you did this, you should have done this. So he let me be the player. And instead of being the soccer parent, he was dad. And that's, I think, what I appreciate most.
And soccer is a game of all mistakes, really, if you think about it. Basketball, they run down the court back and forth. It's score, 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 score. With soccer, it's 1-0, which means you spent 90 minutes not succeeding. And, maybe 20 seconds of that 90 minutes, you actually did something that led to a success and the ball got in the back of the net. But for the balance of the time, nobody was scoring. I mean, you weren't succeeding. You weren't getting the ball from this end to that end and putting it in the back of the net. So that's the message I like to deliver to the players, is that don't worry about a mistake. Mistakes happen, and it's a game of mistakes until someone gets a score. That's the only time you actually didn't have a mistake happen, where someone lost the ball, transitioned the ball, whatever. It just happens. They have to just let it go. So anyhow, Soccer Parent Handbook, you are selling this book on Amazon. Are you selling it through a website at all, or is it just going to go exclusively through the Amazon sales?
The paperback version will be exclusively on Amazon. We're going to figure out where to put the digital copy. I do have a website, scottmartinmedia.com. That's where you can buy a digital copy of Revitalizing Real Madrid, likely the Soccer Parent Handbook, and also a recent magazine I co-founded, which is the Football Legacy magazine, which looks at top teams from ages past and breaks down what their tactics look like. So really fun project. There also might be something on Thinking Fan Media, which at the moment has like an EPL prospectus, Real Madrid and Barcelona prospectuses. So I think you'll likely find them on those two websites. We'll look into the possibilities for additional digital sales later on. But yeah,
Okay.
primarily Amazon. Get the paperback there.
Yep.
That's your best bet.
Yeah, and it makes a great gift too to give it to parents, because a lot of parents do not understand the soccer game. Their kids get into it, they didn't play it. And having a book like this can really help someone if you buy it for yourself, if you buy it for a gift, whatever the case might be. Or if you're a club, you might consider buying something like this and giving it out to the parents as they come into your club, so that you can start to set that culture and set the expectations of how parents should act, what they should expect, how the coaches and parents interact. A lot of times this is all new for these parents. So this is a great resource for, again, a gift. Buy it yourself, get it at the club level and distribute them that way. So the Soccer Parent Handbook, available on Amazon in about a week, and it will be available as a digital download on scottmartinmedia.com. Well, thank you again, Scott. I really enjoyed the conversation and appreciate you coming out and spending this time with us. And I look forward to having you back on again in the future.
I look forward to it.